Okay, I think we have our technical difficulties resolved. Thank you for those of you who are out watching via live stream for your patience as we were working through the technical difficulties. It seems like that's the world that we live in these days, where there's always some technical issue going on. So we think we got the live stream up and running, and we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to this month's campus update. I want to start, we always start with our land acknowledgement. We recognize that all of us at UWT learn, live, and work on or near the ancestral homeland of the Coast Salish people. In particular, we are situated on the traditional territory of the Puyallup. As people on this occupied territory, we have a responsibility to acknowledge the land, the ancestors who have cared for this land since time immemorial, and all our indigenous connections today. We also have a responsibility to acknowledge the histories of dispossession and forced removal that have allowed for the growth and survival of this institution. In light of this history, let us take active efforts to partner with our indigenous community members and neighbors as we continue our work together as a community of learners, leaders, and educators. So thank you. We have a pretty full agenda today. So in the interest of time, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Jan. And I know that Van is watching remotely, but Jan is here in person to do the update. And I just have to say this because people are telling me that they're surprised that there's a budget issue. I've been saying since October, when we realized our enrollment was down, that we were collecting less tuition than we projected in our budget. And so there is a direct connection for us between enrollment and budget. And our enrollment is down 7% this year, which then equates to dollar amounts. So no one should be surprised that we have budget issues this year, but we're going to continue to say it. We're working on trying to make sure that we are addressing the shortfall this year, planning appropriately for next year so that we don't have to do large-scale reductions and layoffs and all of those things that people hate. So if we plan now and if we're conscious of it now, then we won't have to do drastic things as a campus going forward. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jan.
Sheila kind of said it all. I think this, let's see. We're going to talk a little bit about budget. There is nothing new here, nothing I'm sure you have not heard multiple times before. We have pretty much wrapped up our spring enrollment numbers. There'll be a few little changes out there, but it looks like we talk a lot about the percentage. It looks like that'll equate to about $5 million short revenue this year. And we know that going into next year, we don't anticipate a rebound back to where we were, so we anticipate that for next year there will be a continued problem. We are doing some things that try to incentivize and lower expenses, and as you can see, you've got the numbers up here. I'm not going to read them to you. You know, all these things are going on, but we are encouraging people to be very mindful of your expenses. We need to be aware of what we're spending and making sure we're spending things on the right things and not spending things just because we've got money in our budget. And so it's really important to pay attention to that. And part of that reason is that any unspent funds this year can roll to our bottom line and offset that $5 million. So that would be a wonderful thing. We are still working with Seattle on some HERF funding for our tuition shortfalls. We have not heard that from them yet. We got some positive feedback, but nothing definite, so we're hoping for that. As far as next year's concerned, we know we'll start the year with a smaller budget. We've already seen those numbers, or at least the first shot at those numbers. It looks like that the net for tuition will be about $3 million or around in there that we'll see actually a reduction of. And we know that then on top of that, we'll have to fund merit increases, benefit increases, and any of the other standard increases that happen. So we'll have to be prepared for that. So we're asking people to continue. We will go into next year watching our expenses just as we have this year. The one thing we have now heard is that we believe that we will be in a fiscal monitoring plan by Office of Planning and Budget in Seattle. Not a place we want to be. We've never been there before. We don't know what that will entail exactly. We've seen the Foster School and what theirs looked like, but we're hoping if we can come out of this year with something to put to at least balance to a zero for our bottom line, that we can minimize the information and that we'll have to supply on a regular basis and the watchful eye we will be receiving from Seattle. They've been wonderful to work with when we've talked to them, but we're really encouraging people to the fullest extent possible to try to monitor expenses and keep them down. And the one pitch I want to make, everybody knows UWT is coming, and we really want everyone on Friday. Tomorrow there's a session for the PAs and the deans, and on Friday there will be a session open to the entire campus. We've already done the presentation with the executive leadership team, but I'd encourage everyone to come, listen, and if you don't want to come, fine, please make sure you send your fiscal folks. This will really assist in where financial transformation will headed. We're now about 16 months away from the go live, so we really encourage everybody to come out and listen to us. It has some positive things, and I will say the one thing they have said that I was glad to hear, because all of the been through this before know this, it will not go easily. There will be bumps in the road for those first few months, but once we get through them, it will allow us to do things and see things and prepare reports that we have never done before. So it is a positive outflow. Who's next? You're very welcome.
And if I can add, one of the things that we have been doing as a campus that we can't sustain is that we have been paying for semi-permanent things every year from our reserve to the tune of almost $3 million a year out of reserve, which means this, in a year like this year, when we're not replenishing a reserve, what little reserve we have will be gone in 2 years. So I said I'm trying not to be the one who says the sky is falling, but the sky will fall if we don't pay attention to these issues right now. And we definitely could not continue to pay for ongoing expenses from temporary dollars. And that is something that we have been doing for a while. But one of the bright things on the horizon is that we have, as a leadership team, the vice chancellors and the deans have been in partnership, really thinking about what we can do differently to turn our enrollment around. And I'm going to ask Mentha to come up and introduce this topic because, as I said, our enrollment is so tightly linked to budget that all of us, not just those of us in leadership, all of us have to do our part to drive our enrollment back to some pre-COVID levels. And Mentha and her team are leading that effort. So, Mentha.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Chancellor Lang. So for those that don't know me, my name is Mentha Hines-Wilson, and I serve as the Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs. And part of the work that is done within Student Affairs relates to the enrollment of students. We're focused primarily on new students. And so you may remember at the start of the academic year, we had a conversation about the enrollment funnel, the admissions funnel, and all the different elements that are connected to that. And so enrollment is a combination of new students and returning students. And we also know that our campus, like so many across the U.S., have seen declines in enrollment, principally because of COVID. We know our population has been disproportionately impacted by that, and our students have said, not only our students, but across the U.S., that this has been a challenging time for them. So we are in the process of thinking about the ways in which we can rebound. So what will UWT look like post-COVID? So I'm really excited to introduce to you all the new Assistant Vice Chancellor for Enrollment Services, and that is Shannon Carr. So Shannon has been with us since January January. So how many months is that? Not even 6 months. So in 6 months' time, she's had to very quickly become acclimated to our campus, understand our particular demographic, and also look at the ways in which we can employ contemporary enrollment initiatives. So much of what we have done was old school. I refer to it as old school enrollment. Now we're coming on up to the 21st century and we're doing new school enrollment. Shannon can lead us in that effort because she has worked at publics and privates and also is very well versed in terms of what's happening in this particular region, but also has an understanding of the national landscape. So as you can tell, I think she was a really good hire. So far, she has proven to be a really good hire. Her team says she's a really good hire. So, so far, so good. But the proof is in the pudding. So I want you to listen very carefully to what Shannon has to offer and the ways in which all of the UW Tacoma community, emphasis on all, can be involved in recruiting, providing an enhanced student experience, and therefore elevating the retention of students who will then ultimately go across the stage. So with that, Shannon, the mic is yours.
Thank you, Mentha. I appreciate it. It's so nice to see all of you and to be on the University of Washington Tacoma campus. As Mentha said, that I've been here for almost 4 months now, or just over 4 months now, and it's been such a joy to get to know everyone on campus and to get to know the campus community. I have a short window of time, so I'm going to move really fast, but I do want you to know that I am available for questions and meetings after this concludes. This is a campus-wide collaborative partnership, if you will, and everyone needs to come to the table around enrollment, and I'm excited to help drive that forward. I think it's important as a dovetail to the budget conversations to share a little bit of good news. And as Mentha said, we are in enrollment services focused on new student enrollment. And of course, continuing students make up a big part of that picture. But I think it's nice to see some highlights. So enrollment as of this morning, we are sitting at 603 confirmations for first-time in college students versus 584 from last year. So that's a nice little bit of growth. It's not huge, but 3% isn't something I'm going to shake a stick at, so I'm happy with that. And then, of course, transfers are looking equally good. I will say that for transfer student populations, we're really still very much in the mix. We'll have a lot of students still completing applications and confirming their enrollment throughout the summer months. But at this point, we are seeing a fair amount of growth here, and this is something that we're pretty happy with. A couple of things that I just want to note about these trends. Last year we saw a bump in total applications. So when you look at these application numbers, you're going to see that we're down in applications. But while we saw a bump in total applications, we did not see that same increase in completed applications. In fact, completed applications dropped by almost 5%. So we are looking at a better yield this year, and that's ultimately where we want to be. I'll be honest, I don't really care about how many total applications we have as long as they're completed and actionable. That's what really matters, and that's what we're focused on, is getting students to the point that we can make actionable each stage of the funnel. I think it's important, though, when we talk about enrollment, to look at what's happening across the country and the region more specifically. And so this slide really just shows you what's happening nationally. This is the number of graduating seniors or high school students that are slated or ready to go to college. We know that not all of them will. It's still a relatively small percentage of students that are going on to college. This information comes from WICHE. But what you'll see in yellow in particular, and that light gray through the middle of the country, is a particular drop in the number of students. So the Northeast is hardest hit. You'll see double-digit decreases in the number of students coming out of high school there. The middle of the country is a little less. Illinois is particularly hard hit there. And then everything that's in blue in the western region, you can see has some downturns, but also has some upturns as well. We are particularly lucky in Washington to be pretty flat in terms of the number of students who are ready and poised to go to college. The challenge there, though, is that everyone from the Northeast that's been really hard hit, everyone from the Midwest that's been really hard hit, is going to where there still are students, where they're flush with students. So we're seeing a lot of increased competition in Washington. That being said, we're in a pretty unique place because so many of our students are coming from Washington, well over 90%, and the vast majority of our students are coming from sort of our immediate sort of 3-county region surrounding our campus, in which case we kind of have the market, we have a nice niche in the market, and we have great brand awareness. And so we still are at a competitive advantage. That being said, we have a lot of work to do to make sure that we convert these students into, or bring them to our campus community. So we've made some notable focus areas in partnership with many of our campus colleagues. And the first focus area that I want to talk about is the web to inquiry conversion. When I arrived on campus, one of the things I realized is that we were doing some really incredible work, but we weren't filling our inquiry pipelines in ways that we could continue to communicate with students and get them through to application. And so with the great help of our marketing and communications team led by Brian Anderson, we actually installed web-based smart forms on all of our admission web pages. And in the 2 months that we've been doing that, we've seen a 6.4% conversion rate of visitors to our web pages into actionable inquiries. And that is something that now we have those students in a pipeline and we can start communicating with them. We have another 6% or so that started the web form but didn't complete it. And now we're trying to figure out our strategies about how to get those students into our pipeline as well. We, in the past, have, like many schools, purchased names from testing organizations and companies that provide student names in that way. But with test optional coming into play, we're just seeing that the leads from those sources are not as strong as they'd once been. So we're starting to move away from the purchase of cold leads and start to think about where we can focus our intention on qualified leads. And in this process, we're looking at the digital space and how we can partner with companies that are sort of organic searches for students. So when you go out and look for best colleges in Washington, we want to be at the top of those lists, and we're partnering with companies that will put us there. We know also that our partnership with Bothell and Seattle need to be really strong. For the first time this year, we started communicating with the students who were waitlisted or denied at the Seattle campus in hopes that we could talk to them about the value of a University of Washington degree and how Tacoma could be their landing spot. And we'll continue to build on that in subsequent years. And then the last is a real focus in how we are doing digital ad placement. In the past, we've put digital ads out there, which is fantastic. But then when they come to our websites, we can't follow up with them. We're not creating a sustained relationship with those students over time. So by working on our web-based smart forms and then rethinking our digital ad placement, we can be far more strategic. And an example of this is I think that we'll be much more intentional about geofencing. So we have an amazing STEM program here. And every year in the state of Washington, there's a huge robotics tournament. Maybe some of you in the audience, your kids went to this. It's at Eastern Washington University. In the future, if we geofence, which if you don't know that term, is basically putting an electronic perimeter around a location, and then anytime someone comes into that location, it sends up an ad to their phone that they can then click through, and we can start to track that. But we can place ads that are specific to those events and to the programs that those students might be interested in within those geofenced areas, and then start to capture the traffic on those, hopefully, ad clicks. So we want to be much more thoughtful about the work that we're doing in those spaces. The next thing that we want to focus on is our inquiry to applicant conversion. And as many of you know, we implemented a constituent relations management tool, or CRM, this past year. It went live in October, and the Office of Admission has been working on continuing to implement that and grow what we're doing in Slate. But one of the areas that we can look at how we make applicants for all these inquiries that we're getting in is through something called ping data. Imagine that you are a shopper like I am, and you look at a pair of shoes at Nordstrom's, let's say. I never do that, but on the off chance. And those shoes follow me around the web, right? Every page I go to, all of a sudden these shoes saying, come here. Well, what's happening in that case is that Nordstrom's is watching my web behavior, right? They know what pages I'm going to, what I'm doing. We're going to start to do that same thing. Ping data is a small bit of code that's put onto our website, and it tells us where students are lingering. So we know, are they lingering on financial aid pages? Are they lingering on academic pages? Are they looking at housing data? How long are they staying there? And so we can start to create relationships with them, because now an admission advisor can call them and say, hey, I wanted to talk to you about housing. Well, we're not saying to them, do you have questions about housing? We know they do, because we saw they were on the housing page for 10 minutes. People never stay on a web page for 10 minutes, but you get my point. So we want to be much more proactive about how we deliver content to students and build relationships. We want to be thoughtful about our academic and student services campaigns. So I've started to meet with my partners on the academic side of the house to talk about these campaigns. Most recently, we had a great conversation with education, thinking about how we can build out communication to drive to what we hope will be their soon approved undergraduate degree in education. We are working very closely with our partners in institutional research, Alice Few and Andrew Chamberlain, to build enrollment dashboards within Slate so that we can look at year-over-year data, and as more comes into Slate, multi-year data, to start predicting student behavior and be much more understanding of where our enrollment will go. And then thinking about our segment-specific communications. We've talked to all of our students the same without thinking about who they are as individuals. But someone that's coming from the Asian American community is going to approach this campus very different from a student who is coming from the Black community, right? And we want to nuance our communications in ways that talk about resources and what the campus experience will be like in that way. It's going to take us a lot of time to build this all out. This is not an overnight flip, but we're starting in small ways to make the changes and to set the foundation for all of this to be possible. And then last, we want to think about the applicant to enrolled conversion. So once a student applies and hopefully is admitted, how do we get them to actually come? And so we want to think about our continued balance of in-person versus online visitation offerings and services. We, in a post-COVID world, haven't quite figured out that balance and how students want to come back. We are going to be implementing a QR campus tour. So we know that tons of people come to go to the museums and then they walk around campus. But what if they could go up to a building, shoot their phone at it, a video pops up, and they can interact with us now in a way that doesn't require them to schedule an actual campus visit. We want to rethink our student-led tour. We want to start to implement temperature surveys. There is no harm in asking a student, where are you at in your college search? Are we still in your mix? And we don't do that enough. We don't just ask students, do you still love us? Where's the love? If they are going somewhere else, we don't need to spend our time and energy on them. And I'm not saying that to be critical, but we have a lot of other students we can focus on. And then last but not least, we are going to explore estimated financial aid awards. The University of Washington Seattle doesn't release their admission decisions until March. We start releasing ours in October. And so students don't get financial aid awards because Seattle helps us produce those until after admission decisions come in March. Our students wait from October to March without any information about how much this is going to cost them. And so we want to change that dynamic so they can start to see this as a place that's affordable and start to do the planning they need to do to make it affordable. And we can have much more intentional financial discussions with them so they can build their knowledge base about what it takes to be here financially. We're also looking at developing continued and new marketplaces, looking at our international partnerships. Jeff and the team from the Office of Global Affairs and I signed an agreement, a 1+1+2 program with a Chinese representative and Green River Community College this past week, and we want to do more of that. So we're looking at how we can create some MOUs with international partners, primarily four-year institutions offering English language programs for whom they're in constricted areas. I'm thinking about many of the UC schools where those international students may not get in, but they're more than qualified to be here, and we can create some pathways there. Enhancing our P2P partnerships. We have the amazing fortune of having some great Pathways to Promise partners, and we can do more to build those relationships. And last, building our relationships with community-based organizations. We have great existing relationships, but again, we can do more. And then the last thing I want to talk about is when I was hired, Mentha was very clear to me that we would be doing strategic enrollment planning. She was very clear about this, and I have not lost sight of it in the 4 months that I've been here. I will say, though, there's some foundational things that are happening first, and that is that, of course, the university is going through a strategic planning process, and Student Affairs is also going through a strategic planning process. It is the outcome of those two strategic planning events that will give us the framework from which we will build a strategic enrollment plan. And so we're not going to be starting strategic enrollment planning until those processes near completion and we have that framework to grow from. That being said, though, strategic enrollment planning is happening now. I think of and have been informed that strategic enrollment planning is really comprised of two steps. There's strategic enrollment intelligence and there's strategic enrollment planning. And the two of those combined make strategic enrollment management, which is where we're going to get. But while the strategic planning is happening for the university and we're understanding what our framework to build from is going to be, we're going to be doing strategic enrollment intelligence. And part of that is the creation of an enrollment data team. So we are going to be bringing together partners from the campus community, Bonnie Becker being one, so we can really understand that information on what's happening for our continuing students, our current students, our partners in IR, our partners in academic affairs. We'll be bringing people together to look at our data and understand our data in a way that helps us make decisions in the strategic enrollment planning process. And then, not immediately, but we will be building an enrollment council. And my hope is that that enrollment council will be the team that leads strategic enrollment planning. And so we're being thoughtful to who those partners are and starting to get that team together so we can talk about the initiatives and tactics we want to do now, but then also set the stage for the strategic events that we'll do in the future. And then the most important thing I'm doing right now, honestly, is relationship building. Relationship building across the University of Washington Tacoma campus. I've met so many of you on Zoom, and I love seeing everyone in person. But also tri-campus, I'm getting to know my colleagues at the Seattle campus and the Bothell campus, and then of course around Washington in general. I'm lucky to be from Washington and built my career in Washington, so a lot of that exists already, but I've been away for a while, and so it's rekindling all of those relationships as well. I'm really excited about this work. I think that we have a strong foundation for what's to come, and I appreciate your time and attentiveness today.
Hello, I'm Joe Lawless, and I'm the Chief Strategy Officer. And I'll bet if I do that. And I'm going to talk to you about the strategic plan. Shannon, though, I was going to say, I find it extremely easy to believe that Mentha was crystal clear. Mentha doesn't beat around the bush. But I get to talk about the strategic planning process. We are in the heat of that, which is basically the data gathering phase. It's that kind of middle section that is kind of goes broad there, which is really about gathering information, both our data, and part of our data is you and what you think about this university, your thoughts about where our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats are. We've gathered over 1,000 data points so far in that work, and there are opportunities to do more. This is, I understand, really small. I'll put a link to this on the follow-up from this meeting so that you can look further. But just knowing that we're in this internal, external environment phase, identifying our strategic issues so that we can then begin to formulate our strategies moving forward. And I promise you that those strategies will be specific and measurable so that we can then use our data to hold ourselves accountable to them. So, but the big thing that I want to talk about is opportunities for you to give input. So we've created four actually groups: students, staff, faculty, and then open to all. And we created 2 opportunities for each of those subgroups. One is on Zoom and one is in person. Here are the opportunities that are coming up. This Thursday, staff has an in-person one in the TLB atrium. There's an open one on Friday, and that's a Zoom one. Then students in person, and then open in person. So 4 more opportunities to give your input. That doesn't mean that this is going to be the last opportunity to give input. During this phase, there will also be, we're developing right now based upon the input we've received so far, developing the survey that will go out to all of those populations as well as our community and communities that are integrally related to the University of Washington and our strategies moving forward. So those are my only 2 slides. And I know that we're on time here, so I will turn it over regarding our leadership searches.
Thank you. I joked during the last town hall, I think everyone in here is probably on a search committee because we also have a lot of faculty searches going on right now. But the leadership searches that are going on is our Executive Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs. You all know that the candidate withdrew, and so the search committee is actually meeting later this week. We've had a number of additional applications since the initial interviews, so we're hopeful that there are some viable candidates still in the pool. They're meeting on Thursday, and so we'll have more information at that time. And we have our Vice Chancellor for Equity and Inclusion searches going on, and that's chaired by Rachel Endo and Jimmy McCarthy, and I made some notes here where we were. They have completed their first round of interviews, and we will be having campus interviews. I think I wrote the dates down so I wouldn't forget them, May 23rd through 26th, so we'll be welcoming candidates on campus for the Vice Chancellor for Equity and Inclusion there. And then we have candidate on campus right now for the Dean of the School of Interdisciplinary Arts and Sciences. That's co-chaired by Carolyn West and Raj Kati. And so we will be wrapping up those interviews here this week. And then the Dean of the Milgard School of Business, that's chaired by Lisa Hoffman and Sergio Davalos. They are, as of today, they have about 50 candidates. They expect a few more candidates before the candidate selection meeting. They were saying that a lot of diversity in the pool in terms of academic backgrounds, professional experiences, and race and gender. And so a very, very diverse group going forward. They're going to review candidates and have a first round of interviews, about 8 to 12 of them, hosted virtually next week, so the 17th and 18th. And then afterwards, they are trying to get candidates to campus the last week of May, first week of June. So that is where we are going with that. Lot of searches going on. And you all know that our Vice Chancellor for Advancement is still open. We're working with the Seattle campus to do an assessment of where we are in terms of our development structure. It's an integrated model, so it's fundraising, marketing, communications, legislative relations, and so we're looking at how we're structured and also just asking critical questions about how do we begin to build that next generation of donors to the university, but also building on the work that Shannon is doing in terms of how do we brand ourselves as distinct and unique from the Seattle and Bothell campus and other regional universities in the state. So we have the fundraising team is partnered with a communications team to do the start of what we're calling tri-campus branding, so that we can begin to talk about what is unique here at UWT, so that as we're talking to students, as we're talking to potential donors, but also potential employees, what is unique and special about us here? So that work will be wrapping up this summer. And then you all know that we have an interim dean in nursing and healthcare leadership, and the idea is that we would launch that search in the fall, but we'll do as much of the pre-work as we can this spring, trying to get the search firm lined up and as many of the search committee members identified so that we can launch that early in the fall, so that we could have someone named by the end of the academic year. So a lot of searches going on. As I said, there are many faculty searches and others that are going on. Okay, so the next thing is probably my most, before Brianna comes up, and I have to say thank you to Brianna for all the work that she's doing, I just want to do a special plea. We all work on a college campus, and when our students graduate, that means that we have done something really unique. They have done something really special, but we have been part of helping them get over that finish line, helping them get onto that path to what they want to do. And that's everyone from safety and security to the faculty in the classroom to advising to the admissions team, everyone who gets, all of us, there's no one on this campus that doesn't play a part in helping our students get to commencement. It is for, and 56% of our students are first in their family to go to college. It has real meaning for them to actually graduate. So my special plea is, help us celebrate with our students. Their families, this means so much to them that they are completing these degrees. So let's all join together and help celebrate our students and celebrate what they've accomplished with their families. It means a lot to them. It means a lot to our community that we're launching the next set of leaders out into the world. And if we're not there to celebrate them, it's like getting them, it's almost like that image of Marshawn Lynch on the 1 yard line. Oh no, he didn't get to the 1 yard line because they gave it to somebody else. We don't want that to be our story, right? We get our students to the finish line, and then we just say, oh, somebody else will be at graduation. We can't do that to our students. We owe it to them to be there that day celebrating with them. And this year is going to be even more special because we're bringing back the class of 20 and the class of 21 along with the class of 22. And for the class of 20 and the class of 21, they were really robbed of their commencement celebration. I mean, we did drive-thrus, we did virtual things, but families like to celebrate in person. So help us, please, that's my plea. Come out and help us celebrate our students, all of us, because all of us play a part in helping them get to this point. So, Brianna?
Thank you, Chancellor Lang. I was not expecting to talk today, so I have no notes, so bear with me. So we're just over a month away from commencement, and as you guys I think are aware, we're doing 2 ceremonies split by academic program, and all 3 classes, 2020, 2021, and 2022, will be intermingled, so we'll be celebrating all 3 classes in both of those ceremonies. And we're out at the Washington State Fairgrounds Grandstand. If you have not been there before, it's going to feel a little bit more intimate than the Tacoma Dome, which is great, and it's outdoors, so we're all praying for nice weather, but it also allows us to have a little bit more flexibility, not knowing where we were going to be with COVID when we made these decisions, 6-8 months ago. So there is a form that's out there if you are unable to participate on the day of for your supervisor to fill out. If you have questions about that, let me know. I'm working with each of the units at the vice chancellor level, and they're sharing kind of who amongst their group I can work with to try and answer any questions staff may have, that kind of thing. We're still working on carpools and some transportation, but in the Q&A section, if folks have questions, I'll be around to answer if anybody has commencement questions. So we look forward to seeing all of your smiling faces out there. And I'm looking at Megan Cooley because she's super excited to be greeting, as she has done the last several years. The admissions team is always the first face that our families and grads see as they get to the location. And parking is free for all guests and staff. Thank you, Dr. Medeiros, for that, because I know that was a question we received. But this year we'll actually have 2 sets of greeters. So if you want to be part of Megan's smiley crew, and we don't have to seat the accommodation guests. So that is something that has always been a challenge for us. So that may have deterred some people wanting to be out there that day. So we'll have a sunny Puyallup Fair day. There will be scones because the scone truck will be open. So if you're a fairgrounds person, that's an important thing to note. But I know, everybody loves the scones. So anyways, if folks have questions, I'll stick around for when we get to the Q&A section. But I look forward to seeing all of you, plus all of you that are watching virtually on June 13th. So thank you.
Thank you, Brianna, for all that you do. And this is your busy season with all of the end of the year events and then commencement. So Stanley's going to come up and give us an overview of where we are. I know many of us have been anxiously watching Milgard Hall as it is coming up faster and on budget, which is my favorite part.
Thank you, Jocelyn. Good afternoon. My name is Stanley Joshua, Director of Facilities. Shout out to facilities, of course. Finance administration too. I got to make sure I cover my boss. Just a brief, quick update on Milgard Hall project. As the Chancellor was saying, good news that we're on track, scope, schedule, and budget. It's opening January 2023. It seems like a long way off, but there's still a lot of things that that needs to happen externally and internally of the project. So just keep that in mind. Also, that it is housing a couple of elements that you should be aware of. If not, the Milgard School of Business, the labs for a space for SET, the support SET, and also the expansion spaces for Global Innovation and Design Lab, which these are huge spaces, and we'll give you a rendering at the next slide and just give you a look how it looks, the look of it, and it's really nice. And also the high impact spaces, right, for teaching and learning and the classroom space. Some things you need to be aware of that on the sustainability side for those who are sustainability lovers, it is a mass timber building. You cannot see that on the picture right now, but I'll show again on the next slide some renderings that kind of highlights the key features of the mass timber. And then there's a couple of major milestones as you are coming on and leaving campus that you'll start to see, and it's the more shiny stuff, right? It's the stuff that you see walking by every day, and that's the masonry, the glazing, which is the glass, the site work, and of course the landscaping. And then interior-wise, there is still the mechanical, electrical, AV, and a few other things that infrastructure-wise that makes it habitable. and it makes it a great place for you to enjoy. For your viewing pleasure, if you just happen to have nothing to do, there's a link that you can look on and look at the progress of the construction. I think you'll enjoy it. And here's a rendering. Okay, mass timber, highlighting the mass timber. Very nice. It's going to be a beautiful place to come in and learn, teach, have events. Just a very nice place, and we've got a great project team that's over there, day in and day out, just making it happen for us. Any questions? Thank you.
So there's a lot going on, as you all can tell. We have time for some questions.
Okay, we do, and I've had a few sent in. I will start with one that was sent before, and it says, is there a plan either by the City of Tacoma or UWT to address the increased homeless population near campus? I've been with UWT almost 25 years, and this is the first time where I haven't felt safe walking around campus. I've been followed to my car after work. I've had to lock down our suite due to people wandering in that are not students and don't have the best intentions. I feel uneasy walking to Starbucks. All of these incidents have been reported to UWT Campus Safety, and they are doing an amazing job. This is not a concern for how they are handling things. I think this needs to be addressed at the campus level, as people need to feel safe coming to work or school.
Yes, thank you for that question. And I want to thank the safety and security team because they do an outstanding job. This is an issue for all of Tacoma right now. And so the Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs and the Vice Chancellor for Finance and Business and I went and met with the Tacoma Police Department a couple weeks ago now, just to talk about our expectations for how we would engage with Tacoma Police in response to a report that we had gotten, but also to hear from them what kinds of things they are doing to increase safety on and around the campus. And so the chief has talked about a commitment to community policing, which is being more proactive and just being out and visible and establishing relationships around the campus. So I know that he has some really interesting ideas about how to improve safety. He's employed a group that I think he might have worked with because he came to us from Texas. And so there's a group from the University of Texas that he was working with on some kind of alternative safety plans, particularly given the increase in homelessness population. We always have to be careful, though, that homelessness does not mean criminal intent. So I just want to make sure that we're not mixing those two up. We've got a lot of safety issues that are out in our community just as a result of all of the anxiety and mental health related to COVID. So it is, the number of assaults are up all over, not just in Tacoma. But the new chief does have a plan, and we're partnering with them, particularly as it relates to our particular campus. And so that's why I started with thanking our public safety team, because there is a community liaison officer from the Tacoma Police Department who has a very strong relationship with our Director of Public Safety. And so they are in constant contact, and we plan to do more.
So I've got a couple more quick questions. This one's actually easy. I think I can answer it for you, Jan. And it's whether or not the limit on conference attendees would include the Student Conference and Event Fund. And I believe the answer is no, and I am correct. The answer is no.
And it also doesn't include the professional development dollars that faculty have to go. And then we're trying to do some more professional development through the staff association. So there's many things that we just want people to think carefully about, is this necessary before they make trips? Not that we're going to say you can't have any trips. We're trying to do things now so that we don't have to get to a point where we say no one can travel.
The next question actually was for me, and that is what time the strategic plan input sessions are, and they are during this hour, the 12:30 to 1:30 hour, for remote and in person. And I've got some other questions here, but I think they're going to take more than the couple of minutes we have before we finish. One is about redefining what education is and looks like moving forward. So many of my courses are cemented on in-person attendance. Are there efforts being made to make more classes hybrid or online? So
Yes.
I think that is.
The answer is yes.
Yes.
And then one of the things that I have been talking about or thinking about, and I probably need you all to give me your input, is to take our COVID sort of response team and transition that to a team that helps us think about what does this university look like post-COVID? Going forward, we're going to have a lot more hybrid courses and online offerings than we did pre-COVID. But also, what does the world of work look like for us? I mean, the question has been asked, are we going to continue with the telework agreements? Is that working from home forever just part of what we do? And I don't know the answer to that, but maybe a group of us could collectively put our heads together to say, this is what's going to happen here at UWT. I will tell you, this is something that is happening all over the country at brick and mortar universities like ours, trying to imagine how we come back to in-person operations and instruction, and what does that really look like? Because it's not going to be anything like what we had before March of 2020.
And I have one last question, and it's for Shannon, and it's a question about probably one of the best acronyms ever. What is WICHE?
The Western Interstate Commission on Higher Education.
Oh, that's good. It is the Western Interstate Commission on Higher Education, WICHE.
Yes.
So,
And it's a conglomerate of
and
state
there's a
policy.
WUI too.
Oh, it is. But it's a conglomerate of state policy organizations in the West. And they do a lot of higher ed policy. They do a lot of data analysis also for the region in terms of where higher ed is going.
I think that's it.
What, no questions from the audience?
Are there any quick questions from the audience?
I didn't get any budget questions.
Well,
Tell your friends, we do have a budget issue going on.
If you have questions, whether you're here or watching from home, UWT Town Hall at uw.edu. I get questions to that throughout the month, not just on these days. So please feel free to send those questions, and I'll try my best to get answers for you if you do have questions. So thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks, everyone.